in my personal opinion, I think there's probably significantly more open source than there should be. And when we talk about open source, this is where I think it's important, at least from my own sanity, to very clearly separate open source as a license type versus collaborative development as a method of actually creating a software artifact or an IP artifact, right? And Linus, just in the last year or two, actually did an interview with the CEO of Intel, and he commented on this, and his sense was, I don't like any environments where it's clear that the value received from that community or collaborative effort is lopsided in some way. Meaning that somebody who's not putting as much in is getting much more out, or that there's a level playing field that anybody can take this and do with it as they want in the direction that they want to take it. And so, yeah, I have a big problem with what I refer to as bait and switch licensing, because if your point is to build, to call it open source to the point that you have enough people depending on it, that you can actually flip them over to a commercial model, then I find that disingenuous. And I find that to be just not a good practice. And yes, and we've seen it frequently. And I think there's been a pretty strong trend to, just like CentOS, to fork and to create something that maintains that same path of value, but do so in a continued collaborative and open way, as opposed to moving to a commercial model. And I consider it a threat. I put it not that far from malware, as far as what you can't trust as a user, because most likely you're not able to use that project like you had anticipated, and what your plans were, what your roadmap from a technology standpoint looks like, and how much you're spending and where you're investing both time and money and resources, people and money, to actually make whatever solution you're actually out to make. So yeah, I consider it a pretty significant problem.
I wholeheartedly agree. And this is why we did CAOS so differently, and ensured that it was separate. We created a foundation from scratch to manage this, because we felt as though we're actually trying to manage a slightly different problem than I think many of the other foundations out there have done, which is to cross-pollinate. And again, this goes to one of the earlier questions and things we were discussing, to better cross-pollinate commercial interests into open source. Like the operating system is just such a clear area of focus where we need to be creating an open and absolutely stable foundation. Nobody, we are at the point in our technology stack that nobody should ever have to worry about certain core components. And is that going to go away? Or am I going to have to go pay for that? Or am I going to need a license something for that? Like, running your operating system is one of these core critical foundational components that I just believe we all are running into the exact same issues. Everyone, competitors, everybody, we're all running into the same issues. And that those issues are not where our business value lie. So as a result, if we collaborate where we're not adding value from a business perspective, it makes sense, right? There's no business value in it anymore.
Or the value is in the collaboration, right? The value is in the interoperability, or the value is somewhere around there. So I often dislike to hear open source has no differentiated value. It doesn't have that. I don't find that to be true, but it's a different kind of value, right? And for me, yeah, anything in the platform space, like Linux, like Kubernetes, like OpenStack, these are very fundamental platforms on top of which you can go 1,000 different directions from a solution standpoint, and you all have the same problem. You need to start with a platform, and it's really helpful if it runs the same in lots of different places.
I think that's a great point. Exactly.
Yeah, and like people very often kind of talk about open source like, this is free software. If I contribute back, then I give things away. This is charity. All the things that have nothing to do with their product development, that have nothing to do with maintenance, that have nothing to do with the business value or anything like that. And we've been talking to a few people and just kind of looking into how the language around open source evolves in the corporate and commercial space, because we can't really talk about contribution anymore. We have to talk about investment. We have to talk about risk. We have to talk about return on investment. We have to talk about maintenance. So when we are talking about value, like if you're maintaining a piece of software that you rely on, everybody else relies on, that does not, as you both pointed out, bring the actual business value to the company, then doing the maintenance all together with everybody else, that will bring the maintenance cost down if we actually do it right. It will also reduce your risk if you're maintaining something upstream, because then you know exactly what's coming down the pipe, as opposed to depending on everybody else maintaining the software correctly or safely enough, or whichever way you want it to go. But somehow, when it comes to this collaborative software development model, all these things don't really seem to land with companies. A lot of times, in my experience, it's really hard to convince anybody to do anything else than throw their feature over the fence. And then watching it land, hopefully in the spot where they envisioned, that roughly happens, and then they are just out. And sometimes they complain that the feature didn't land fast enough, and complain about, things not happening the way they wish they would, but they don't have the bandwidth to do it. They don't have this, they don't have that. And on the other hand, if you look at things like review bandwidth within any community, like that doesn't just magically appear there. That's all from those individuals who are investing their time, if it's something that they are doing on their own interest, or individuals working in the community on behalf of a company who are investing their time, and the company investing, their people into that project for a very good reason. But somehow that's just not how the conversation goes very, very often.